Speaking of losing an hour over the weekend, of course, springing forward as part of daylight saving time. But as we mentioned, there's a new study that shows it could actually make our roads a little more dangerous. Research from the University of Colorado found that fatal crashes increased by 6% in the week after the time change, with drowsy driving playing a major role. Attorney Amanda Demanda joins us now to break down the risks and the legal consequences and how drivers can stay safe. Amanda, good morning to you. Thanks for being with us. Let's start with the big picture. Why does daylight saving time lead to more car crashes?
Morning, and thank you for having me. I think it's important that we understand that one of the major issues we have with accidents is distraction or being groggy or being tired. And the groggy drivers, as you were saying, the darker mornings and the reduced visibility at the earlier hours in the day is really a contrast to the pattern we're used to every day. And introducing this just from one day to the next without people really taking the precaution to change their sleeping patterns or their habits with a weak anticipation really creates this unnecessary increase in fatal accidents that we see in March. It spikes up every year during this time, and it's something that could be eliminated if we consider changing the time to just stay one time during the year so there isn't that interruption in sleep pattern. So that's a big issue we have with people on the road.
Yeah, Amanda, I mean, I've showed up to work this morning, felt a little groggy myself just because, we do not really take into account how much that hour of sleep really does impact us. And so when we're all out on the road groggy, yeah, I do understand when you say that we should expect more crashes out there on the road. So let's talk about that study. It's from Colorado. Found that fatal crashes increased by 6% after the time change. So what makes this time shift so dangerous for drivers? Is it just boiling down to that 1 hour and we're just so groggy out there?
People want to underestimate. They say, well, it seems small, it's just 1 hour. But sleep experts have actually shown that losing just 1 hour of sleep can change your cognitive function and your decision making and alertness. And since there's millions of drivers adjusting at one time, it kind of collaborate into a mess on the street. But also the people that are accustomed to jogging earlier, the cyclists, they're not taking the same precautions that they would when they're expecting daylight to be out, and now it's a lot darker. So it's really just a combination of all these things mixing and really causing an issue on our roads, and something that could be eliminated if we just looked at it from what's the good anymore in this time change, really. So eliminating the time change can absolutely make our roads safer. And it is a push that we're seeing in a lot of different states going up now to the legislator to see if we do make a change in that point, because it is significant. Even though it seems like just 1 hour we're losing, it is significant when everyone's losing it. So it does add up.
Yeah, so let's talk about the research that your law firm has done. You guys have actually been tracking, searches like, do we lose an hour of sleep in March? Tell us about your research. What have you guys found with that?
Well, we've found that in conjunction with the other research that have been done, it does support the spikes we see in calls we get for early morning crashes, particularly in the early morning, not so much in the afternoons. But there is a spike around this time in March, and it typically lasts for about 1 week after the time change. So we do believe that it's directly related and that there's a correlation there, that we could try to make the road safer by eliminating the time change all around.
Can you talk about how losing just 1 hour of sleep, and you kind of alluded to it in your earlier answer, but how does losing 1 hour of sleep impact a driver's reaction time and focus out there on the road?
But when drivers maintain a more steady sleep schedule, and we see this all around, especially with truck drivers that have to drive a lot of hours and continuous for work, that when you have a continuous sleep pattern, it does help your reaction time. And distraction is the number one cause of accidents. And we see this now more and more with people being distracted on their phones, with radios, with technology in their vehicle. But when you have lack of sleep or an interruption in your sleep pattern, in combination with now it being more dark out and you not having the same routine that morning, it really does impact how you're going to react. So reaction time is everything to avoid accidents and avoid other people on the road and not cause obstructions. So there's a direct correlation in the lack of sleep or interruption in the pattern of sleep as to when the human body is kind of waking up and seeing sunlight. I know you all saw the sunrise there together and it was beautiful, but that does make such a difference to us and our mental state and cognitive state when we go to drive in the morning.
Yeah, especially because, we are just getting used to that one less hour. It's not just losing an hour of sleep. We kind of take that hour of daylight in the morning time and put it on the back half of our day, right? So we're still trying to get used to some of the light that we're typically seeing around that time. So I'm curious about, warning signs. What's a warning sign that a driver might be too tired on the road?
Well, typically drivers that are exhibiting either being exhausted or sleepy or intoxicated, they will forget to turn on their lights. Most of us have automatic lights, but you'd be surprised how many people are not using their lights correctly to illuminate the street, or they're not using their blinkers, or the more obvious one is they'll start to swerve because they're just not paying attention. Or many of us are on autopilot just in our life in general. You're used to a pattern and a schedule, and in the morning you're just kind of following the rhythm of your day. And if that's interrupted by something, then now it's darker out and you're not really appreciating that, you may forget to turn on your lights, and that's a real issue and hazard because you may not appreciate that jogger that's on the street, or other vehicles, or people walking their pets, etc. So it is an issue, and that's one of the highlights of someone being distracted or drowsy or intoxicated, is that they forget to use their headlights.
Is there a difference between distracted, drowsy, and drunk driving? I mean, really, I feel like all of the themes are the same here, is that you kind of do lose some sort of cognitive ability with each of these aspects, right?
Absolutely. I think they're all equally as dangerous. That's why it's interesting when how heavily we penalize somebody who is intoxicated by alcohol, say, and they take the wheel, because that's kind of like an intentional act. But here we are with something that people don't think it's dangerous, and it's seemingly, well, under the law, they change the hours on us. So it does cause almost the same effect of distracted or drowsy driver. And that's why I'm always behind pushing to eliminate the time change and just keep it one or the other. But we should eliminate the time change.
Yeah, so you're talking about eliminating the time change. Have you seen other efforts across the country to kind of eliminate that? And if so, what are those?
I know, for example, I believe Arizona already completely eliminated it, so they just stay on one time the whole year. I know Texas has introduced a bill this year, I believe, to try to change it. And every so often, you get different states popping up here and there. And I know a few years ago they were trying to do it at the federal level, but that kind of didn't take much, didn't get much traction. But I do think if we look at the studies and how we can keep our roads safer, which should be everyone's goal, they could really use that to boast that initiative.
Yeah, let's go back to drowsy driving. We've talked about how it isn't just dangerous, it can be legally risky as well. Can a driver be held liable for causing a crash due to fatigue?
Well, yes, absolutely. It just becomes, I think, difficult to prove because unless we can prove that they're intoxicated or consume some sort of drug or alcohol, as in DUI type cases, in a case where you're kind of just distracted and it's early morning and you're just groggy, it's hard to pinpoint that. So that's why we just look at the increments in the accidents happening after the time change, and it's curious to see it. It correlates, obviously.
Yeah, so if someone is in an accident and it's caused by somebody who is found to be a drowsy driver, what should they do to protect themselves legally after that accident?
Well, the driver themselves, it all depends if you're the one at fault or not. I think that the police at the scene are the ones that are in charge with trying to identify if there's fatigue, if there's anything that stands out from either driver involved, because sometimes maybe both drivers weren't paying attention. And what's interesting that happens as well, just like when they're doing construction in any street, it takes about a week's time for people navigating that street to get used to the new traffic patterns. So here, if you, for example, have a time change and then also a construction site happening at once, that's a recipe for disaster. And it's really the officers that get to the scene that are kind of tasked with understanding what happened and why it happened and asking the right questions. I think being forthcoming with the officers and making them understand what occurred or what you didn't see can help us all to make our roads safer.
Interesting. Let's talk about insurance. The insurance aspect of a crash is usually the part that everyone hates aside from the actual crash itself, right? So how do insurance companies handle crashes caused by drowsy driving? I mean, could a driver see a higher premium if they're found at fault here because of drowsy driving?
I think in general, if you are found to have caused an accident and a claim is launched against your insurance, you may be at risk of seeing higher premiums thereafter. I don't think it's specific just to drowsy driving, but if some findings are made in that regard in any particular instance, I think that that's something your insurance will definitely keep in its record. So it's important that we all make the efforts we can to make sure we're not drowsy when taking the road, and that we take into account that it is going to be darker outside, and that our morning's going to feel a little bit different until we become accustomed to it.
Yeah, it's all about getting used to it. Okay, so speaking of getting used to it, what are some simple steps that drivers can take to avoid drowsy driving after the time change? Of course, I know a lot of people probably getting up and getting going this morning, and a lot of coffees, I'm sure, filling those cups. So what can people do aside from, the caffeine stuff to make sure that they have a safe drive to work?
Think it's more so just being aware that it's going to feel different because you could try to go to sleep earlier for a few days to get in the rhythm, but just recognize that it's going to be darker out. It's not going to feel the same, and be more attentive because you may not see people that are sharing the road with you, either pedestrians, joggers, cyclists, and even other vehicles, and maybe they forget to turn on their lights. So if you could be aware and you try to be more vigilant, I think it will help everyone as a whole.
We've talked a lot about cyclists and pedestrians out there, people getting their morning jog on, all of that stuff. What can those folks do to stay safer during the darker mornings?
I think I always say this to all cyclists and joggers. If you're going to be sharing the road with vehicles, vehicles will win. You don't have as much protection as someone in a car. So make sure you're wearing reflective gear, you have some lights on you, you're trying to use sidewalks or areas that are off the road where you're not sharing with vehicles, and that you make yourself as visible as possible. And as much as possible, if you're going to cross a road, make sure you make eye contact with the driver, because just because it seems that the vehicle is stopping for you does not mean the driver saw you. So I would just tell everyone that's using the road, pedestrians, joggers, people taking their pets out, make yourself as visible as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I go out on walks almost every single day, and every time I'm crossing a street, I always, no matter what, try to make eye contact with that driver to make sure that I know that that person saw me trying to cross the street. And I'm sure that gets even more important as we move into the earlier morning hours where there's not as much daylight, right?
That is correct. I think direct communication with the driver is important. I think people should avoid using headphones on both ears so that you're aware of the noises and all the signs you could possibly take away from the road so that you can make faster decisions if you have to. And just try to make yourself as visible as possible
All
with
right.
reflective clothing. There's a bunch of different tools out there, but I think it's important that we remember that just because we are jogging and we are feeling ourselves and we want to go for a walk does not mean that the drivers are looking out for us.
Yep, exactly. They've got their own things that they're worrying about, probably just as we all do, right? All right, Amanda Demanda joining us. Thank you so much this morning for your expert in advice here. We really do appreciate your time.